Have you ever been in a group of people where you felt yourself changing the way you were just to fit in with the group? I know I certainly have, and I'm willing to bet many of you have as well. I mean, for many of us, this may make you think about the influences we started to notice when we were in high school, and you tried desperately to fit in with the cool kids. Well, that social pressure is the theme of today's video. Conformity is the change in a person's behavior to go along with the group, even if you don't agree with the group. One of the first psychologists that looked into this was a man named Solomon Asch. Back in 1951, he came up with an experiment where he had participants in his study come in and answer a series of simple questions. These participants were in a group with other people that they believed were other participants, but they were actually paid actors. The actors were instructed to answer each of the questions posed incorrectly, and these were pretty simple questions too. For example, one of the questions posed was that he would show the participants a card with a line on it that looked kind of similar to this one. So basically, he would ask them to look at line X, then answer which of the lines on the other card, A, B, or C, was the same length. This should be a really easy question, and the participants would always come up with the correct answer. But then when the actors in the group started to unanimously say the wrong answer, the participants actually changed their answer to conform to the groups. This led to the discovery of something called the Asch Effect. The Asch Effect refers to the influence of the group majority on an individual's judgment. There are some things that can help influence this Asch Effect. For example, the size of the majority. If I'm in a group of 3 people and the 2 other people have a differing opinion than I do, I probably won't feel this Asch Effect as strongly as if I were in a group with 20 other people, all with opposing views. Another factor is whether or not there's another dissenter present. This reminds me a little bit of that saying that misery loves company. I may be in the minority, but if there was at least 1 or 2 other people that support me, it doesn't matter so much how many people are in the majority and have a differing view. I may not experience that Asch Effect as significantly. There are 2 main reasons why we tend to change our behavior in order to conform with what we believe to be that behavior that's expected from the group. The first is normative social influence. Normative social influence is where people conform to the group norm in order to fit in, to feel good, or just feel accepted. This reminds me of that old saying that you sometimes need to go along in order to get along. Normative social influence tends to be very common. People don't like feeling like they're outcasts. We like to feel like we're accepted by other people, and this is what normative social influence is all about. Informational social influence is the other aspect that influences conformity. It's where people conform because they believe the group is competent and has the correct answer. It tends to be a lot more common when the task in question is a little ambiguous, or where we just don't really want to waste our time with trying to think of a solution for ourselves. Another way in which conformity can influence our behavior is with the difference between social loafing and social facilitation. Social facilitation is where being part of a group helps encourage us to perform better. It's common when we talk about things like being a member of a team. For example, if you're on a sports team, you try to encourage one another and support one another. The crowd helps further this encouragement, and you find that being in a situation like this may help you to actually perform better, to do better than if you were just by yourself. This is a great example of social facilitation. Remember, with social facilitation, being part of a group helps you perform better. With social loafing, being part of a group leads to a diminishment in performance. I know I sometimes see this when I do group projects with students. Maybe I'll have a group of 5 or 6 students and give them some sort of project to do together. It always seems likely when I do this that I'll have 1 or 2 students in each group that just does the bare minimum. They know the other students are going to do the work, and they're all going to get the same overall grade for the group project. So they don't really see the point in actually doing anything. In this case, these students' performance is diminished when they're part of a group, basically the exact opposite of social facilitation. So far, I've talked about conformity, where an individual person changes their behavior to conform to the larger group. However, sometimes we have cases where one person changes the behavior of numerous people. This is called obedience. Obedience is the change of an individual's behavior to comply with a demand by an authority figure. One of the first psychologists to really explore obedience was Stanley Milgram, who developed a famous experiment on the topic in the 1960s. In this experiment, Milgram recruited participants that were told that they were helping the researchers in conducting an experiment. When these participants came into the lab to help out with the experiment, they were told that they needed to sit at a desk with a dial on it. The dial was marked from 15 volts all the way to 450 volts. They were also marked with verbal indicators that said things like slight shock, dangerous shock, and XXX. The last one corresponded to 450 volts, which was the maximum. Sitting adjacent to the participants was a person with probes attached to them that they were told were the actual subjects of the experiment. However, they weren't aware that these were actually paid actors. The actual participants sitting at the desk with that dial on it were told that they needed to ask the other person a series of questions. Every time the person got a question wrong, they were to deliver a shock to them. They had to start at the lower end of the voltage, then progressively work their way up, delivering stronger and stronger shocks. Now, these participants didn't actually know that they weren't delivering shocks. The actors were just pretending. However, the participants really didn't know this. Sitting in the room with the participants were lab assistants. If the participant was hesitant to deliver a shock to the actor, they would be given a series of prompts from the lab assistants. Initially, the prompt may just be where they were told that the researchers would like for them to deliver the shock. If that didn't work, then they would say that the experiment required for them to deliver the shock. If that didn't work, they would tell them that they had no other choice but to deliver the shock. What ended up happening was that over 2/3 of the participants ended up delivering shocks to the actor, all the way up to the point that the actors were yelling out in pain. Some of them were saying that they have heart conditions, that they're going to die. And in some cases, these participants still delivered shocks all the way up to where the actor pretended to be unconscious. Now, you may be telling yourself that the participants knew that it wasn't real, and that the person answering the questions and being shocked was just an actor. However, this wasn't the case. Many of the participants were visibly shaken, crying, and some of them actually needed counseling afterwards. When these participants were told afterwards that the shocks weren't real and that the other person was fine, they were asked why they did what they had done. Most of the participants mentioned that they knew what they were doing was wrong and that they shouldn't have done it. Yet again, over 2/3 of them still did it. What happens in situations like this is that we experience what is known as a cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance refers to a psychological discomfort that arises from a conflict in a person's behavior, attitudes, or beliefs that runs counter to a person's positive self-perception. Basically, in this case, the participants were being told to do something they didn't want to do, and that they knew was wrong. Oftentimes, we face situations where we're expected to do something we know is wrong. We experience this type of cognitive dissonance. In the case of the Milgram experiment, the way the participants dealt with this cognitive dissonance was by passing the liability onto the researchers. They did what they did because they were told to do it by a person in a position of authority, the lab assistants. What's interesting is that this is the same answer that many people gave during the Holocaust to explain why they helped the Nazis perpetuate many of the atrocities that they committed. This is also an example of the difference between situationism and dispositionism that I talked about in the general overview video. This is one of the reasons why I always say, don't underestimate the power of the situation to influence your behavior. We tend to view stories like this as being about bad people doing bad things. But a lot of different studies over the decades have shown pretty conclusively that anybody is able to be caught up in a bad situation. Understanding that this is something that can affect us means that we're less likely to pick the wrong choice when faced with a cognitive dissonance. In the end, when the voice of reason in your head is telling you something doesn't sound right, listen to it. At the very least, consider that what you're doing may not be right, even if you're being told to do it by someone in a position of authority, and even if everyone else is doing it. Unless that action is subscribing to my YouTube channel. In that case, you should definitely just do it without asking any questions whatsoever. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.